Jesse Paulette Kane Israel, and I was born in Gainesville, Georgia, Hall County, 1951. Well, they came from South Carolina. They've been in Georgia since the 1800s. My mother was Pauline, and she was Pauline Morgan, and my daddy was Virgil William Watson, and he actually came from Ellijay, up in the mountains, kind of. But her family came from Franklin County, which was Carnesville, Georgia, those little areas in there. She was working at the movie theater in Gainesville, and he came to the movie theater. I guess that's how they met, supposedly. Maybe 18, 19, I guess somewhere there. It's pretty young. She was the only child. Of course, Gainesville was a smaller town back then. Now they've changed it and kind of remodeled it, and it looks entirely different. See, I'm in the Daughters of Confederacy. I'm also in the Daughters of the American Revolution. My grandfather was Lester Morgan. My grandmother was Eula Shockley Morgan. And I actually lived with them most of my childhood because my mother and dad didn't get along, and so they were always fighting and fussing, and they finally did divorce. So. But my grandmother was fabulous. She lived to be 98. Yeah. Now, my grandfather died early. I was in, I think, 7th grade when he died. Sudden heart attack, and he was only like 60-something, so it was just a really bad. So it was just me and my grandmother for years. He was a painter, and he did painting and wallpaper and remodeling of homes and things like that. His dad was Silas Watson, and his mother was Jessie, who my first name's after. Jessie Smith was her name. And actually, when I did my research, when they did research for the American Revolution, we went back to that side of the family, to the Smiths, which I didn't know any of them because, but she died very young. And then Silas, he was actually married 5 times. He was a very mean man, they said. So I wasn't around him very much. My grandmother didn't want me around those people. So back then in the South, that's just the way it was. Most of her friends got divorces too. Most of my mother's friends, but it seemed like they just kind of hung out together. A lot of women that she knew, and they'd go have coffee, and they were always looking for a man. In other words, I hate to say that, but it's the truth. Yeah. So she had several boyfriends. She did remarry a couple times, but it never worked out. A lot of people, where I came from, were educated, so they just worked and plant. We have, chicken plants and cotton mill. All that's big. I didn't see my daddy very much because he drank a lot, and he gambled, drank. He's one of those kind of people. And I can remember when they were married, my mother going to the clubs. There was these little private clubs back then, unlike now, and sitting me on the bar to go look for him. It's crazy. That sounds nutty, don't it? I just sit up on the bar with the bartender. I remember that as a child, and my grandmother would get so mad at her. My parents lived next door, and then my grandparents, so it was easy. It was back and forth, but they really wanted me there at their house. So yeah, I grew up in a big 2-story house, southern house. They were both just wonderful people. And her mother, my great-grandmother, lived with them for a long time, and she died when I was a child. Yeah, her name was Melissa. We called her Lissy. And she fell and broke her hip. And back then, they put you in a full body cast. And it took my daddy would come, and my grandfather, and have to lift her out of the bed on the potty, so never recovered much. But she lived to be in her late 80s. I was very spoiled because I was the only child, So, and they had had a baby in forever in the family, so, and I had an aunt and uncle, and Uncle Homer and Aunt Amy, they lived across the way. And my Uncle Homer used to hire a hot hole moonshine. He had a special car. But Aunt Avie was just this pillar of the earth. She was wonderful. She was my great-grandmother's sister, but they were close. They'd come visit a lot, and my Uncle Homer had a Cadillac, and he'd drive it on a Sunday. They were special people, yeah. I grew up with older people, so I guess that it has an effect, as a child, because I was never really around small children. We had dogs and things like that, and cats, but never around, like, small children. Until I went to school and had playmates. Yeah, I had a lot of friends, but it was a neighborhood where people, played outside. We had a little store down the road, and you go walk to the store and get a Coke and a whatever, and moon pie or whatever you want to eat back then. And everybody was just, friendly, and you didn't lock your doors. It was safe, and it was just a really neat experience. we had a TV. When we got a color TV, I remember she bought a color TV. It was way after my grandpa died, and the dating game and match game and all that was on. It was so beautiful in color. Yeah, and you put it in the living room because you don't go in the living room much. That was for dress up. Well, back then, like on Sunday dinner, my Aunt Amy would cook everything. We'd go over there and they just cover the table up with a cloth, and then you stay and visit and talk and everything, and then when you have supper, just uncover the table. That's how they did it. And in her house, she had feather beds. And then I had a great aunt who lived down in Franklin County, where the original Sharpton family came from. And they had a cotton farm. And she lived to be in her late 90s. She lived past my grandmother. I used to go visit her a lot at Carnesville, Georgia, Franklin County. All the men died early, and there were so many widows. She lived on Highway 51, and now that's a big, interchange in there. But actually, 85 is close. But there was like widow, widow, widow. And they were all good friends. But all of them, husbands had died. And I don't know how they made it, because she didn't even have running water for a long time, or a bathroom in her house. She had an outhouse because she had a farm. And she rented her pasture to people for horses and cows, the board. But she had one little spigot, and she had to heat her water, so that's how she, took a bath and stuff. She had a well, but after, she got tired of that, so they put in the running water and a bathroom. But the bathroom was really just a toilet and a sink, because she had a tub thing she used and filled it up with water. Yeah, and she had the old pine floors. Her walls weren't painted; they were just plain, like because they built that house, I'm sure, together with people helping. But I loved going down there. Oh, she had a coal stove. And she put wood and coal in it. Back then, people heated with coal. My grandma had coal. Well, you didn't heat the whole house because, remember, I'm in a big 2-story house. Actually, almost 3-story. And you only had certain rooms you stayed in the winter because it's too cold and you can't heat all that. But she'd order a big load of coal, and you have a little coal bucket, and you put it in the heater. Yeah, you can put your coffee on the heater, on the top of it. But it was just nice and cozy in the rooms that we stayed in. Yeah, but in the summertime, then you can open up the rest of the house. Yeah, it had a big wraparound front porch, and everybody just sat on the porch, and it was just what you did. Yeah, had a glider and a porch swing and rocking chairs, and you had the milkman who'd come. They bring the milk in the bottles. You had the milkman, the paper man. The doctor came. When my great-grandmother when I was a child, he'd come to the house. The doctor came to the house to give her a shot every once in a while and check her and all that. Yeah, a lot of people would come to the house. Drugstore, you got your drugs delivered. Most everything, a lot of things were delivered. Groceries could be delivered back then. Strange, isn't it? But I had my dolls, and my dog. I had a collie dog at that time. And just loved my dog and my grandma. I've twirled baton. That was fun. But no, I didn't go to college, because a lot of people, we just didn't have money to go, and I just never really thought about it. I wish I had now, looking back. Went to school, I had friends, and a lot of girlfriends. We hung out. And, back then, and it was the 60s. I graduated in 69 from Gainesville High School. And in the 60s, you rode your hair at night. You slept on those big rollers, So that's what we did at night. We'd all get together and roll our hair and fix up. And it was all about Aquanet hairspray. That was one of the ones. And I had a friend, she'd spray her hair just stiff as she could get. She would. And back then I had another girlfriend who had boyfriends. Some of their boyfriends, they went to Vietnam. So, we lived through that. Yeah, that was a bad thing. Oh, my God. See, I had Becky, Janelle, and Joyce, and me. There's 4 of us, okay? Becky always had a boyfriend. Always. She always had a boyfriend. And the rest of us, we had friends, but not really boyfriends. Yeah. Now, Janelle had a boyfriend, Buddy Queen, and he went to Vietnam. And she broke up with him in a letter. That happened too back then, those Dear John letters. She sent him a letter. Yeah. And then she met a little redheaded boy and married him. No kidding. And I just thought that was so ugly of her to do that, but she was my dear friend. But I guess she thought he wasn't going to come back. But Buddy came back and tried to get back with her, but she didn't take him back. I think she met him riding around too much. If you didn't meet them in high school, you beat them riding around. I didn't know anybody got killed. I didn't, but I know people that did know people. I didn't know a lot of people that were in the military. I didn't know much about the military back then, but a lot of them did come back messed up. I would hear so. Yeah, and some people would get married, some wouldn't. My grandfather was still alive, and I was in junior high school, downtown Gainesville, and they just everybody had to go home immediately. They just closed schools. And I remember on the street corner, I had a lady that I rode to school with, and she'd pick up several of us, and they had a special edition of the newspaper. The Times newspaper came out, and they were standing on the street corners hawking the newspaper. And I remember that, and people were just in the streets and crying, and it was just amazing. I mean, it was. And then from that day, when that moment forward, when I got home, we stayed glued to that TV for all those days, watching the funeral and everything. I mean, it was like nobody, time just stopped. We didn't do anything. Again, except mourn JFK. All this happened during my high school years. Yeah, Martin Luther King too. And it's just terrible thinking another one, and then King. It was just like, are we, what's going on with this world? And protest and, all that was going on. And it's very racist. Okay, you got white and black everywhere, and you go to the doctor where you had the white room, the whites and the blacks, and like for instance, downtown Gainesville was a little square at that time, and we had a little store called Woolworths. You may have heard of the Woolworths. Had a little lunch counter. Well, white and black didn't sit together, and I remember everything. And the black people lived on one side of town, the white people lived on the other, and you didn't go on that side of town. That's just the way it was. I didn't go to school with any black people. Not in my school. They had their own high school. But eventually they closed it my senior year, and the black people came over, to my, well, the next year, I'm sorry, in 70, the black people came over. When I was a senior, there was about 2 or 3, and that was all. My family wasn't racist like some people, but, I mean, it's just like we just didn't know black people. We'd never been around them and didn't know anything about them. Oh yeah, back then people were very racist. You just didn't talk about it. I was never around a lot of people, I guess. I was more of like an only child. I was by myself a lot. So, like I said, I was in this big house with just me and my grandma. So we were kind of sheltered, I think, from a lot of stuff, the racism and all that. But now there's another town in Georgia called Dawsonville, and black people didn't go there after dark because they hang you. They have hangings. I guess thinking back, it's just hard to believe people did that. You'd hear about it, but I was never around it, or you just hear about it. But there was riots and there was, stuff, protest. Yeah. This is my opinion. When Kennedy died and Johnson became president, to me that was some bad years. He came to Gainesville. Johnson came to Gainesville, and I mean we walked down the street to see his car go by, and he spoke in Gainesville, but because he was doing the for poor people, trying to get more money, and because people lived in just shacks, and a lot of where I grew up, so they didn't have good housing and good food and stuff. I think he did a lot, but I was never really fond of him. I just felt like Kennedy's life got cut short, and Johnson kind of was so happy to get to take over. I guess he was a good president, but I wasn't crazy about him. When I was in high school, the hippies happened. And Atlanta had their flux. Where I lived in Gainesville, a small town, there wasn't anything to do much, on the weekends that ride around. And we even go to the airport and watch planes take off. That was fun. But the hippies came, and they was all on 14th Street and all the streets down through there. And you could just ride up and down the street, and they had their babies, and they sold flowers. So you'd park the car and just walk with the hippies because it was fun. Yeah, so we did that too and when I was in high school. But the whole street was just nothing. If you go back and look at pictures of Atlanta back in the 60s, there were the hippies. If you go back, you can find pictures. And there was a magazine, a newspaper called The Great Speckled Bird. They just sell those newspapers, and it told all about it. And they did just sit on the side of the street, and they'd sell flowers, and you could smell the pot, smoke pot. And, I never smoked pot. I didn't know anything about pot. But I think people in my high school class probably did. But when I met Don, he was from Miami, so his mother and daddy smoked pot. And she's like, I know you smoke pot. I'm like, Don, I don't even know anything about pot. He couldn't believe I didn't know anything about pot. But the hippies came, and I guess they brought Maybe they brought the pot with it. But there was a whole bunch of hippies. I can still see it. It's just, you ride up down the street. It's hard to imagine they were there. When you ride up down Peachtree Street, can you imagine there was hippies? Kids, we played rock music, but you have to remember the Beatles came. I saw the Beatles. The old Atlanta Stadium, August 18, 1965. I know exactly when it was. Yeah, me and 3 or 4 girlfriends. We were going to the girls' club. It was a little club, for girls, and the director was our chaperone, and she brought some more women with her, and me and my 2 girlfriends. And we was on the front page. They put us on the paper because we got to go see the Beatles. Yeah, and it was when we got to Atlanta, it was like Beatleland. People were in the streets with just screaming, trying to find out which hotel they were at, and I think they were at the Americana. It used to be called the Americana, close to the old bus station. But they were at the old Atlanta Stadium, and we were so excited. It was the most amazing thing ever. Of course, they put them on the other side of the stadium and didn't sell those seats, so you couldn't hardly see them. But still, it was just amazing. I know a lot of people liked Elvis, and I did like him later, but he just, wasn't appealing to my group, my 60s people. So it was the Beatles. And in fact, this guy from a newspaper in Athens, he was going to the University of Georgia. He did an article, and I was one of the people he interviewed about 2 years ago, put in a magazine, because I'd seen the Beatles. Yeah. Yeah, I saw Elvis, too, twice. I have a scarf. My ex-husband's family loved Elvis, so we got tickets and saw him, because right before he died, we saw his last performance in Atlanta at the Omni. But the first time I ever saw that man, I was electrified. It was amazing. Because I wasn't a fan of Elvis, but I went, because the whole family was kind of going. And I'm telling you, that performance, it was just, he could just control that whole place. And he had the sweet inspirations. They, warmed up the audience. And they had these beautiful chiffon dresses on. And, yeah, it was amazing. People rode around. Yeah, cruising up and down the road, that was that way. Yeah. And all my friends had gotten married, so I thought, well, maybe I should get married too. So I got married young. Yeah, so I got married because all my friends got married. I didn't want to be left alone. Yeah, but I didn't really know him very well. I wish I, had known him better, but because he liked to drink, and that was our problem. So, because my daddy was a drunkard. I mean, there's no other way to. That's the old-timey way to put it, but he was a drunkard. And my grandmother just really didn't want him in her house. And a Mustang, Mark I. He had a boss Mustang too. He liked Mustangs. Yeah, beautiful car. You dated the guy because he had a good car. Because all my friends dated people that had the Chargers, the Dodge Chargers back then. I didn't date very much, and I didn't, I didn't have a dad. My grandpa died early, so 21 years. He was the devil, turned into the devil. I tried to leave when my children were young. And he'd come try to beat the door down at my grandma's house. Back then, she had sold the big house, was in a smaller house. My mother lived with her. And I had nobody to turn to help me, So I didn't want him to take my children because he threatened he'd take them and never see them again. So I bided my time until they got a little bit older. And one night, God took us out of it. And we've had a fabulous life ever since. Best thing ever happened. It wasn't all bad at the beginning, but he just got worse and worse, like drinking, and just went spiraling down. He worked in the mill. Then later he worked for the DOT. But he worked at night. So see, we didn't see him very much. And I think that's one reason the marriage was so long, because my children had a lot of activities. They were in everything. And as long as we got back home and we got in the bed by 11 o'clock, before he came home at 12, we were good. We could do whatever we wanted to do. But then he got on day shift, and he was home all the time, and that's when it really got bad. We weren't around him, so we could do whatever we wanted to do. Because he was very controlling. It got very controlling. Very abusive, controlling, drinking, just bad stuff. Very low self-esteem. Jealous. He was very racist. You can ask my children, very, very racist. My oldest daughter experienced a lot of that. If we would go somewhere, like to go get food or something, she'd be with us. If a black person parked next to us, he would just try to pick a fight with them. It was very embarrassing too. So, yeah, because we weren't that way. Yeah, he was just very racist, and mean, just mean. I think he just got full of the devil. That's the only way, because I raised my children in church. I mean, we went to church all the time and, all that. And he didn't want to go. He went a little bit, but not really. And I thought, that's just not going to work for me. Because back in the South, you went to church. Everything is based around church. And back to the childhood part of me, and the church was just down the street. And you would have ice cream socials. You'd have dinner on the ground. You had revival in the yard. They'd come set up the chairs, and you had revival in the yard. In the summertime. But he just never grew up like that. He came from a kind of crazy family. His mother was married several times, and there was all kind of stuff in that family going on. And I think he just didn't have a good childhood. I think he was just kind of pillar to post. She had 4 children, and she was just in and out of their life, and so was her dad. But it was just sad. So I have 3. 2 are twins. Yeah, I have a boy and girl twin. My oldest is Candace, and then I have Adam and Amy. Yeah, they're about 2.5 years difference, so it's almost like having triplets. No, I just wanted to have a second child because I didn't want Candace to grow up an only child like I did. Because it's sad, because when people die, you got to do all the funerals, and you got to take care of everything. It's a very big responsibility being an only child. If you've got older people that have raised you, especially when they all start, to deteriorate or get sick or go to the hospital, and you got to take care of them. It's just hard. Probably not long after the children came, and I realized, I don't want my children to be raised in such a hostile environment, I guess is a good word for it. Because, we would just be on our toes. He liked everything just perfect, and, we made sure everything was done before he got home. And then it was very good. You could do one thing wrong and get by with it, but when you did 3, explosion happened. Yeah. And he didn't like my children having friends over, and it was just like we were just so bound by his rules, and it got more rigid as time went along. It was like you couldn't do anything. And we began to, we had dogs. That's how I got into boxers. My mother-in-law had one, brought it back from Ohio, and it's the most beautiful dog. And we got some, and we started, raising boxer puppies. And it was fun. The children loved it. And it gave us something to do. And so everybody had a dog. And Ashley, when we left, my attorney didn't understand the dedication we had to these animals. And he's like, well, I can save the children, but I don't know if I can save the dogs. I said, we got to save the dogs. So we had to give him 1 dog in the divorce settlement. And so to this day, my children have dogs, and, they love dogs. Dogs were a big part of raising those children. I think that helped them. In fact, Candace, she had Jasmine, who went to through high school, college, and almost law school with her. She died when she was in D.C., was working in D.C. at the time. We had started going to a new church because the church that we went to was a little bitty church and didn't have a lot of activities for them. So I told them we're going to find us another church. So we started going to First Presbyterian in Gainesville. The youth ministry had just started. His name was Paul Evans, and he really helped me a lot. He was in our life a lot, and he helped me raise these children. So they started, doing handbells and choir and, going to lock-in. They had lock-ins back then. I don't think churches have that now, where they'd go spend the night in the church. So we saw there's another world out there besides the world we're living in. And I just kept praying, for the Lord to take us out of it. And so one night he did. And in fact, Adam had gone to play basketball at First Baptist Church because he was in the Boy Scouts. Candace was gone, and I was home with Amy. Amy's just kind of like my shining light. She was always been with me through things. He just got totally out of hand, and we went out in the yard, and I told Amy, I said, this is it. We're leaving tonight. We're never coming back. We're never going to do this again. So we got away. We just walked up the road and got away. And we called a policeman, and he came and he let us get a few things, and we went to the women's shelter. And I got to pick up Adam and Candace and take them with me. And then I found a lawyer who really wasn't afraid of him. Because most everybody is afraid of people like that. Yeah, because you don't know what they're going to do. Because then you could just see the devil in his face. And I knew something bad was going to happen. You have to come to the breaking point, and it has to get that way. Because I was scared, because I didn't have anybody to help me, or I would have left sooner. She knew, but not all of them knew we were going to get out. And if you remember the movie, The Burning Bed, we were going to do that. I really thought we were going to have to do something drastic like that to get out. I knew we had to get out because I was at the end of where I could, what can I do to get these children out of this? And I worked 40 years at a radiology group of doctors. And I started working when Candace was 3 weeks old there and managed to keep that job for 40 years. Can you believe it? And, you know, he didn't make much money, so we didn't have a lot. But was able to buy a house. We did buy a house and remodeled it. And at least they all had a room and all that. And my attorney said, you got to get your house. You've got to get it because those children need a place to live. And I didn't want anything. I just wanted to go away and just start over or whatever. I was going to do it. But his name was Mike Casper, a fabulous attorney. And so he got the house for us. And it was difficult. We had a trial. He wouldn't settle. And I wanted to settle. I kept telling Mr. Casper, we're going to have to settle. I can't do this. And he's offered a settlement, but we're going to trial. And we're going to get through this. It was hard. So then we all went to counseling, and we just started working because all my children are very, very independent and very successful now. I mean, any kind of job, we'd get it. I mean, we worked as elves for Santa Claus, the Easter Bunny. Oh, my God. Restaurants, everywhere, anywhere that we could find a little job. Babysitting, we did a lot of babysitting. And a lot of people at the Presbyterian Church helped me because we would babysit for people that had a lot of money. And they'd pay us good. And those people helped me get through, raise these children and get through life. And my minister, Paul Evans, who later became the big minister, he went through trial with me, sat with me every day. You hide it. You don't want anybody to know that you're going home to a crazy place. And you never know what card you're going to pull that night. You know, it could be a peaceful night. It could not be a peaceful night. And he'd just go outside and he had guns and stuff. He'd just go outside and shoot the guns sometimes. I tell my kids, that's our theme song, A Whole New World. It's a whole new world. And I'd sing that song. I'd play that song. And you can be anything you want to be now. Yeah. So they did. They are very successful. It's amazing what we did. And a lot of people say, haven't you done it? Only by the grace of God did I get through it. It was the truth. And it's like, what am I going to do? Lord, I have this older house. I have these children. And my attorney said, well, you could always rent a room. So you know what I did? I rented a room. It's nuts. So we had Gainesville College at that time. Now it's a bigger college. And the first girl we had was Misty. And she and Amy became good friends. And so I just started renting rooms because, I had to have money. You got to think of creative ways to make money. And then I went to work at the Times newspaper selling newspapers. At night, I'd leave Gainesville Radiology and I'd go over to the newspaper. And I was one of the top sellers. I can sell a newspaper to you in a heartbeat. Because they're like, what can I do with that? Well, did you know you can use it in your bird cage? You can clean your windows with it. And I just went over all the stuff you can do with a newspaper. I'd work over there from 5:30 till 9. And in fact, Adam worked over there on the dock packing the paper, which he didn't like it, but it was a job. And Candace, when she was in college, she worked selling the newspaper in Spanish. They started a Spanish, because, we began to have, Gainesville came, a lot of Hispanics moved into Gainesville. So we just started working, and I started renting rooms, and I went back to do my will, and Mr. Casper said, well, how y'all making it? And I said, well, pretty good. I did what you said do. He said, what did I say do? I said, you told me to start renting some rooms. He said, you really did that? So then I had another room, and it was like, and I had met a very good friend. We met in the lawyer office. She was getting a divorce, and I was getting a divorce, so we're still best friends. She said, Polly, all you got to do is you got a lot of rooms in that house, just rent more rooms. So we began to have students, and I had an African boy came, and he lived with me 11 years. He came from Gambia, and his father was a diplomat. And back then, if you've heard the movie Blood Diamond, his college dissolved. And his father had 9 children and sent them to different countries, and he got USA. And he called me up. He went to New York, had $50, stayed with his cousin in the Bronx. And he said he hated it because it was just gunshots all the time. He wanted to come to the South, and he called me because I was on the list at the college, and I was a rental. And he said, I want to come to your house and live. And I'm like, why do you want to come to the South? He's like, it looks like my country. Like, okay. And so I asked my boss, I said, because she'd been on an African safari. She had money. And it's like, I think he'll be a big black guy with pretty white teeth. And he was, big old guy. He was so wonderful. And it was like he was our child. He became close with our children, and we still, hear from him at Christmas. Then I had a boy from Kenya. He don't jump and he don't run. But he does speak Swahili, he'd say. And then we had a Japanese girl. We had a Korean girl. She lived with me 3 times, Saran. But she kept setting off the alarm. And I said, Saran, you cannot set off that alarm because they're going to charge me. The Kenyan helped teach her English. It's crazy. And that's just what I did until, my kids went to college and I still did it. And Candace kept telling me she was going to go to Brunel. It's a women's college in Gainesville. I'm like, well, I don't know how you're going to do that. Well, I'm going to go, Mom. I'm just going to go. And she's very independent and very, self-made woman. So she got a scholarship. So she ended up going to Brunel, and she was in a sorority and everything. Yeah, and then Adam and Amy, she went to work in Washington. She worked for Nathan Deal, she worked for Bob Barr, and while she was up there, it was time for the twins, to go to college. So she said, I've got a college for Adam. He can go to Berry College over in Rome. I know all about it. And so Adam didn't want to go to Berry College. He wanted to go to Georgia with his mangy friends. They're smart boys. Adam was geeky. He was real smart. And I held him back in first grade, killed me. But that was okay because he made straight A's after that. So he graduated in 96, Amy in 95. And Amy never studied. She was just brilliant, So Candace was at Brunel. And so I took Adam over to Berry. It's the largest campus in the world. It was founded by a woman, Martha Berry. And she was friends with Ford. So we went over there. He wouldn't get out of the car. He said, I'm not going here because all they do is go hiking, and I don't do that, and blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, that's okay. I'll go in and look, and you just sit in the car. Well, he got out, and they, wined and dined him, and he's like, I guess I could try it. And I said, well, if you'll go there a year, then I'll let you transfer to Georgia. They took him up on the mountain. They call it the mountain campus. He had to go early because he had a scholarship. They took him up on the mountain. He come back out that mountain, and he was Berry College all the way. His sophomore year, he met Fran. Okay, then Mama goes over here to the side. Fran's his wife now. But Fran's wonderful. She is. She's a school counselor. So that they all through college dated and all that. And Candace was now still in Washington, okay? But we all were interested in law. After going through what we went through, Candace kind of wanted to help other people. So she realized in Washington, you can't do anything up there unless you got a law degree. So she decided she was going to go to law school. But Adam decided before she did. So I told her on the phone one day, I said, Adam's going to law school. She said, well, I'm going to go too. I said, okay. And then Amy went to Wesleyan in Macon. It's a women's college. But she later transferred back to Brunel. Adam and Candace went to law school. And they didn't get in the same school at first, but they did get into Mississippi, so that's where they went. Jackson, Mississippi. Very racist. And Adam couldn't believe how racist it was when he got there. And Kenneth kept saying, Mom, he's going to get killed, I'm telling you. Because he'd go running. He was a runner. He'd go running in the daytime, and at the State House, there'd be all these protests. He'd just, fuss with them. Because back then, when we first went to Mississippi to look at the school and all, you could just walk in the governor's mansion. You could walk in the State House. No security. It's crazy. She graduated, and she became a divorce attorney. And she worked for a big firm in Gainesville until she found out they had a slush fund, and she wasn't part of it, and she was a named partner. And they had a lot of money that she wasn't getting. When you're a partner, you get a percentage. So she took 48 clients with her and left and started her own firm. So then Adam, he became a criminal lawyer by accident. He wanted to be an environmental lawyer because he went to school and became a Democrat because I guess there's a lot of liberal professors, and you hear this. So, and Fran's mother was very liberal. And they've been married now 24 years. Well, then you got Amy. She studied to be a psychiatrist, but she ended up with studying communications. So when she graduated, she got a job as a TV anchor. And so she could have went to Channel 6 in Augusta. We went there and visited. She didn't really like Augusta or Toccoa, Georgia. So she ended up at Toccoa. She could drive back and forth at first. And the first day she went, the engineer was Don Michael. And he saw Amy, and he said, I'm going to marry that girl. So and Amy was very popular in high school. She was a beauty. She was all this. And Candace they looked just alike, actually. Candace was more geeky. She was more, didn't lay out on senior layout day. One of those, where Amy, she's going to party. And Amy never studied. She just went through high school, just wonderful, just popular, and da. I always had a different boyfriend, but every 3 months. And in fact, it was nice she had a boyfriend because I needed things done, okay? And one day I'm like, this guy came and he said, "Where's Amy?" I said, "Well, she'll be back in a little bit. You can come inside and wait." He said, "Okay." And I'm like, "You got a truck?" "Yes, ma'am. What, do you need something?" I said, "Mm-hmm. I need to go to Lowe's and pick up a freezer. Can you go with me?" So I'd use those boyfriends. And then we had a pool. We had a pool that had been built during the marriage, But anyway, and they'd have to keep that pool up. So she had one boyfriend. He came cleaned out the pool one day out the door, and he was in a wetsuit. And I came to clean the pool out, and Amy said, "Mama, I'm breaking up with him next week, so you better hurry." And she'd break up with him. Then she met Don. He was 9 years older. He was the engineer at the little radio, at the little TV station. And so they hit it off. So she ended up, Adam married Fran, Amy married Don. And we had the weddings. One was in April, one was in May. And I didn't know how we was going to get through those weddings, but we did. And it was beautiful. Everything was great. And then Candace married a little bit later. We have group 1, group 2, and group 3. Group 3, there's only one in it. Group 1's in college. Group 2's in high school. And then Maeve she's in middle school. But my oldest grandchild, Carson, is going to be a lawyer. He's at Mercer. He's going to be a corporate lawyer, he says. So if you've got money, I've discovered life can be so much easier. But when you don't have it and you're struggling, it's like, what do you do? And back then, there wasn't a lot of help for women. Now, there's help. There's food banks and there's places. And, we didn't have, like if there was a funeral, where you gonna get these dressy clothes? Like Adam had one little suit. When I was raising my children, there was no thrift stores and Dollar Generals and all like there are now. My grandmother and mother helped me so much, with those children. So my grandmother was strong, very strong woman. Met Dennis, okay. Met him at a church function, kind of like a little singles thing down in Roswell, Georgia. And he'd been single for a long time. He was just looking for the perfect woman, he thought. And I didn't care, and I was happy like I was. I was still renting rooms and raising children and never, I said I'd never marry again. Never thought about it. Then I met Dennis. And so he would come to my house in Gainesville because he thought it was fun. And it was because I had all kind of people living there, and he'd bring his newspaper. He loved reading the newspaper. He loved to read books. He was a teacher. He was teaching when I met him, but he did really retire. And he came from a very stable mom and dad family, whereas I didn't. And he'd come to my house. He'd just want to hang out with all the renters because it was fun. And it was interesting to have people to talk to. So we kind of hit it off, and then we got engaged, and then we decided to move to Habersham County, where I'm at now, because Amy had moved up there, her and Don, because Don's parents had settled there. Don was from Miami, but his grandparents would come in the summer to Habersham County and visit, and they liked it. So when they retired, they moved up there. Then his parents moved up there, so that left him in Miami. He said, "Well, I'm going too." So Dennis was lost. He lived in Atlanta down in Marietta. He taught Cobb High School and all that, and he taught history. And then he retired. But when he got up there, he just thought he was lost because there's no, there's a few newspapers, but there's nothing. There's nothing there. He was always used to getting in the car and going to Walmart. We didn't have Walmart, but he needed to be out of the traffic. He didn't need to be, you know, where it was busy like Atlanta. So he got used to it though. He'd volunteer everywhere, and then we started doing background in movies and TV when all the movie industry came to Atlanta. He loved it. He thought it was the most fabulous thing ever because he could take his books, take his newspaper. They feed you snacks. You just sit around and make friends, and it was just like a social event doing background back then. And we started, in the early days when he kept reading in the paper. He said, "We need to do this." Like, "Well, let me apply." So we applied with Cynthia Stillwell for a movie called Selma. It was going to sweep the Oscars, but it didn't. And we were in church when I got the message that we had got hired, and I thought, "Oh my God, we're going to be movie stars." I just thought it was the most amazing thing ever. Yeah. I've been on every Tyler Perry show. Love working over there. We worked at the old studio, which was fun. You'd hold at the church, and he'd come in when he got the baby. He'd come into the cafeteria with the baby, and he made everybody a star that was over there, the older shows that were there. And then he built the new studio, and it's a little bit different. But we everything from Captain America to I was in Captain America. I was a mourner. I was like the aunt of Captain America. I got picked to stay in the church and do some scenes in there. And Dennis had to stay in the tent. It was so hot. It was very hot that day. Captain America, oh my God, Dennis has been on Ozark. He was always in the bar. He didn't smoke or drink. He was very religious. And he was always in the bar, considered he didn't drink. Yeah, he worked on Ozark a lot. That was one of his favorites. Just all kinds of shows and movies. And then we met all these friends. So we met this wonderful couple, Star and Luther Thompson. And Luther would have an Oscar party every year. Big old black guy. And him and Dennis became great buddies, and they'd work together. And he had a red carpet rolled out. We dressed up just like the Oscars. Then another friend of mine, Kirsten, she'd have parties. And we just had this group of people that we were friends with. But Luther died. He died after Dennis, a couple years after Dennis, of cancer. But his wife, Star, she's continued the parties. We had the most wonderful time. We did. We didn't get along all the time. And when I first started dating, and my children found out, it was a nightmare. You can imagine, because they were very protective of me. So everybody was doing background checks, and who is this? And they're all talking on the phone, about, it was like, I thought, well, I'm having fun. What's wrong with that? Well, they didn't like it. They didn't like it one bit. They didn't like him. They didn't like nobody. So, but my friend Amy Cash, my dear friend Amy Cash, she helped me get through all that and helped maneuver it. She's still my dear friend to this day. And we just had a good time. He was just fun, and he had been in a lot of productions in college, singing. And, of course, he thought he was fabulous. And then he liked to go to church. He liked to sing in the choir at church. And he liked to volunteer. He volunteered for the Atlanta Track Club. He'd drive to Atlanta, volunteer for those people. I'm like, you are crazy. It's so far. But he loved doing that, and he loved background. He book me up. I'm going to be somewhere every day. And, so we began to buy dressy clothes. You can imagine, but at the Goodwills and the thrift stores, and we got bunches of tuxedos, and I'd get dressy dresses because we were in so many glamorous scenes, and it was so fun because you're going to hair and makeup. I mean, you're a star. People don't understand that all these people in the movie walking across the street, sitting in the bar, those are not real people. They're background people. One of the most fun things we did, we were the couple in the sex store in Nice Guys. They picked us to be the featured couple. So they took Peachtree Street and put porn places, Well, they didn't close off all the streets, and people thought it was real stores. But it was, if you know the movie, Ryan Gosling, he was in a Mercedes in the front taking pictures. He was a agent, and then Russell Crowe was in it. I wasn't in any scenes with Russell Crowe, but a lot of my friends were. They said Russell had an entourage, and he'd come to film, There was a bowling alley scene with Russell. I think a lot of people were in. And when Dennis and I grew up, we never knew anything about sex stores or sex toys and all this kind of stuff. I mean, we knew there was Playboy and all that. So they had all that in there. And we were just like, look, it was just amazing to look at all the stuff they had. The set dresser had found all this stuff to make this porn store. And it was just crazy, So it was a cute scene. Yeah, it was pretty good. And actually, we had a state patrolman, a young guy who lived close to us, and he was one of the people guarding the street. And he's like, "What are y'all doing here?" Like, "We got in this movie." And I said, "How'd you get here?" He said, "I got assigned to it." We were in Complications. That's another series. Then sometimes you bring your car. You get paid for a car bump. We did that a lot because I had a Honda, and it was just perfect. I mean, in Tyler Perry, you can still see my Honda when they show the road. It's right there. I knew the AD, the assistant director. He said, "Bring the car now." I said, "Okay." We'd bought a Subaru by that time, a white Subaru, and they don't use white or red in movies, those cars. I didn't bring the Honda, the one we've been using. And so Walter came to the set and got me, and he said, "Now get the car." And I'm like, "Well, we brought the Subaru. We didn't bring the Honda." He said, "That's okay. Just get in line." So we drove it up to the set. And it's the school where Tyler Perry, he's the dad, and his daughter's going to a private boarding school, if you remember the scene. And it's her birthday. And so he took it up there, and the person who does the prop man, he said, "We can't use that car. It's got a Georgia Tech tag on the front." Because Dennis was a Georgia Tech fan, so he had Georgia Tech all over the car. He said, "Just back it in, cover up the tag." So in booth 2, for about 10 seconds, you'll see a white Subaru right beside the door of the school. Funniest thing. And I got to see Tyler Perry come out and do that scene. And he had a little birthday hat. He was jumping up and down. His daughter comes out, and he's embarrassing her. And he's just, I don't know, he's just amazing. Yes, I just loved going to that set, though, because it was just fun, The The food was good. Everything was great. And one lady, she was a chef, and she was doing background with us, and now she's in Florida doing a lot of chef stuff. But she knew everybody that was the chefs he had there. And she'd say, we're coming back tomorrow. Let's have so-and-so, So we just had a big family going over at the studio at Tyler Perry. I just thought it was fun. Yeah. Oh, yeah, you can do background without an agent easy. Very easy, because you can't get an agent hardly in Atlanta unless you're like, got lines and well known. And the only way you're going to get lines is independent, really. But anyway, we got cast. We heard people were going to Knoxville doing these killer shows. And everybody that was there had an agent but us. And I said, well, how you get an agent? And they're like, well, call this lady over at Gage Talent. She'll probably hire y'all. Well, I called her. Her name's Rochelle Bailey. I've been with her 15 years up in Knoxville. So Dennis became detective, policeman. He got killed. I mean, oh my God, we were in all the killer shows. I was the insurance agent. I was this, that. So we met a lot of people from Atlanta also who was on these shows. But Rochelle, she hired us, and everything, got to casting us. Then we got to be doing better. So then she put us in commercials. So we've done like State Farm and, I don't know, just all kind of commercials. A lot of medical commercials. So we worked as a couple, which was great because we both got paid. We did a beautiful commercial for Parks Real Estate in Brentwood, Tennessee, where all the rich people live. And we were buying this $1 million house. It was fun. That was a good one. We just did a lot together, and she liked using us together. So after he passed away, she uses me a good bit. I was up there in April doing some stuff. And then we got Rose Battle in Atlanta, who I was telling has an office down here. She was a model for a long time, and she did a lot of work for Coca-Cola. And she's helped us, do some things. I did like a commercial, I guess it was called, for some medical supplies at Rick James' big mansion. She gets, it's a few things, but Atlanta's to me, it's a harder market than Knoxville was. Knoxville, when you go to the ID channel and watch those killer shows, there's 18 of them. All of them are shot in Knoxville. People don't know that, especially downtown. They're working on the downtown. But the downtown is kind of bare looking, I guess. So there's a lot of good scenery, I guess, to get. But Knoxville's a cute town. It is. I like it. Dennis had got to where he was falling down, and they said it was a beginning of dementia. We took one of the cars away because they didn't want to have two cars at home and him be driving and stuff. And he'd get mad at you. But he's like, oh, drive. When you take a man's driving away, that's hard. But we lived in Mount Airy, Georgia, which is right up the road from where we are now. And he didn't like Mount Airy, and I didn't either, really. So he said, well, let's just sell this house. So we were going to Florida. Oh, my God, we visited 3 times. I thought it was the most wonderful place in the whole wide world. I couldn't wait. I was going to be a twirler again. They got baton twirlers. They got cheerleaders. Anything you want to be that you're in high school, you can be that again. And so that's what we were going to do. So I sold our house in one day. And we were working on a set that afternoon. We went to Atlanta. Can't think of the name of the town. But it was one of the killer shows. Now they're shooting a few of those in Atlanta. I call them the killer shows, And this girl had been raped. She'd been, beaten and everything. We had we were living in a farmhouse, he and I, as a couple. And she came to our door. So that when we were on that set, that's when I realized I'd sold our house. And I said, Dennis, we got to sign this DocuSign, He said, well, I don't really know if I want to sell it. Well, you said sell that house, so I did, so you signed this. Well, we signed it. And, of course, when you sign it, you can't get it back. I said, well, where are we going to live? So we went to Florida. We got outbid. And so we came back to Habersham. So we got to go back where Amy's at and get a house. So we met this builder who was building this house, and we waited on it to be built. And we lived in Airbnb because, we had dogs, So I had just got a new boxer puppy when I met Dennis. And I went to his house. And I had Whitney, which was Cody's grandmother. And I went to the door. It was the first time I was going to his house. And I said, here, hold him. And he was a puppy with his ears taped up. And he said, what do you want me to do with him? I said, well, hold him. I got to go get Whitney. Who's Whitney? I said, the grandmother. And you got to put this crate together. Get busy. Guy's kind of bossy, I guess. Dennis and I got along because I could boss him around. So he fell in love with that puppy. He's like, well, I've never had a dog in my house before. I'm like, well, you do now. If you're going to be with me, we got dogs. Fell in love with those dogs. But anyway, back to the house. So we bought this house. He lived in it a year, and that's when he began to fall. And we were going to therapy and all kind of stuff with him. And we were going to go out of town. We take a trip once a month. We were going to go out of town, and we had gone to the store and got something to eat, brought it back, and I set him at the table, turned around to go to the garage to get a Coke. He was gone. It was the most shocking thing. I mean, I've been through death, but that death was very difficult. Yeah. So, and the garage was open, the door was open. My neighbors, they're a gay couple, they're so fun. Gay men, that was screaming, and they came and jerked him down, did CPR. And of course 911 came, and it was just a blur to me after that. And they called Amy, because Amy lives about 5 minutes up the road. So he was from South Carolina, his family, and that's where he's buried. So I go and do flowers, I go to all these graves and do flowers all the time. But I go to his grave about every 3 months and do flowers. So then I lost, a lot of my income. So that's why I've been doing the traveling notary stuff, trying to make extra money. It was a sudden heart attack. It was probably the widowmaker. But he'd never had heart problems, so. No, he was all about free stuff. I wish you'd known him. I mean, he would go to a seminar and they'd have pens. You know how he'd go and pick up all the pens. Oh my God, there's so many funny stories about that. He was a fun. You've seen Mr. Magoo. Okay, he's just like Mr. Magoo. Wore little glasses, just funniest thing you ever seen. Before I even knew him, he worked part time, doing. He was a guard for the Falcons game, all the ball games. Could fit the ball game free, and he had been there so long, doing it part time. He was in the VIP section, so he'd get to eat the food and see the famous people. Yeah, so he did that too, But we made a quilt out of his T-shirts. I've still got his quilt, and it was like he just loved doing those races. And then he got to where he was a timer, but he'd do the walking. He said, "I'm the oldest one in that group. I'm gonna get that. I'm gonna get that trophy." And he got his little trophies, Yeah, he's all about winning. He didn't like to lose. He liked to be busy. So he was always in the road, and I was like always worried about him because he was not a great driver. He was always hitting something. Yeah, he had a lot of stuff. He went to the gas station one time, those bars? Well, he hit one of them. Honest to God, it's just crazy stuff. He hit a barrel out down at World Congress Center before they tore it down. He worked for CSC. They had the little uniform, yeah. He'd go to Fox, get to see all the plays. Yeah. He'd park down the street because it's free. And I'd worry about him because he'd walk. I'm like, "Dennis, do you know how dangerous Atlanta's getting?" He said, "I don't care, it's free. I'm not going to pay to park." Oh my God! And he could walk. He could outwalk me. He liked to walk. The thing about Dennis is he had a great mother and father. They were family. His daddy died of dementia actually, and they lived in they had retired in Albany. His daddy was a Dr. Israel, who was a PhD. And he had taught and was a professor and all this stuff. They'd moved around a lot. He came from 4 children. He was the oldest. But see, Dennis did everything they wanted. He was the perfect child because he always followed the rules. The other kids didn't. And he was his mother's favorite. And they had a nice home in Albany, so we'd go visit. And to me, it was like I had a family. Okay, because my kids were married. It's like, well, I'm just over here by myself. And I'm like, I'd call them on the weekend and go, "What are y'all doing?" "Well, Mama, don't you have anything to do?" I'm like, "Well, no. I was going to hang out with you." "Well, we're doing da-da-da-da-da with so-and-so." They didn't want me to hang out with them, So that's how I ended up getting Dennis. Because he was my buddy, Yeah. Because my friend Joyce had found, she had met somebody and had moved to Rome, Georgia, which that's where she still lives. But she and I were together all the time. But they said, you replaced Joyce with Dennis." Oh my God. But he liked to go to the movies. We saw every movie that came out. Of course, a lot of them we were in. Yeah. And it was just like, he just loved it. He liked to go to dances. We'd go to the Elks Club and do the Valentine dance and the blah, blah. He could do any kind of dance because he had took dancing at dance studios. I mean, he could do waltzes and he could do all that stuff. It was amazing. Yeah. And my minister, Paul, married us. He married all my children, baptized all the children. My minister. Now he's in Jefferson. He retired, but he's doing a little church in Jefferson. But I listen to him every Sunday because he's still my guy. Yeah. He's been through everything with me. Yeah. But he married us too. And the thing is, in your 50s, when I'm not 50, it's like I'm in my 20s again. I'm in love. I have, a partnership that I never had. And it's like, well, God, why couldn't I have had a good marriage and raised my children with good parents? Why did we have to go through abuse and them beat down and them having to go through therapy? But it made them the grown-ups they are today. I think it made them better parents. It made them better people, because they're very passionate about what they do. Like I try to talk to my grandchildren. Of course, they don't like to hear me sometimes. But, like, well, I know this. And, they don't want to listen to you. But I think You just got to get the word out there. Yes, plant the seed and it'll grow. I do believe that. In your 50s, though, I think it's a great time. I thought it was wonderful. And we had energy. Dennis and I, we'd go walking. We started doing water aerobics, and we just had time. I was still working, and he was retired, but we just had time to do things, you know. And he liked to take trips. We'd go to Pigeon Forge, we'd go to Florida, we'd like to go to Fernandina Beach and take the dogs. And it was just the most, to me, I'd been sitting at home for 20 years, raising children. So I was free. I was having a great time. I mean, we went to the Bahamas. We went everywhere. He had a good retirement and and then he was working, we were doing part-time too, so we had money. Money made life good. We bought a brand new house. I mean, I was blessed. I'm still blessed. Yeah, but he was a good thing for me. Sorry. It was good. Don't get married too young. Try to know people before you commit your life to them, I guess. I'd have to go back and see my grandmother. That'd be my... Well, I constantly talk about the past because I go to so many graves. And I have looked up so many people, like my grandfather's family. He was raised by a great aunt. He didn't know his family. So I'd like my grandchildren to know that my family, they didn't have a lot of money. They were farmers, most of them. They dug in the dirt, and they planted cotton, and they grew stuff. And they even had slaves, a lot of them in the farms, because that's what people did in the South. One of the old farms, I found out that one of the slaves, he even stayed there with the two widows because that's what they knew. They were their family, and they all stayed together. They weren't mean to them or nothing, not like what you hear about. I'm sure there was some. But I want them to know that our family was strong, and they helped build this country and make it what it is today so that we can be free. And I think being free is one of the greatest gifts you could have. Because if you don't feel like you're free and you're just beat down and, or maybe in a job you're struggling, you need to get out of it and do something else. But now there's so many vocations and jobs you can do. You don't even have to go to college if you don't want to. There's vocational schools. And I don't know, I just think the world is a big place. And I always talk to my children, Gainesville, Georgia is not where you have to be. It's little. There's a big world. And I want you to see it. And they could go to work anywhere they wanted to do. And that's what I think my children are teaching their children. I don't know, I just want to be happy. And I want them to love the Lord. We didn't get much of the Lord in this, but God is so prevalent in most Southern people's lives, and He's real. He's there. And if you don't trust in Him, I don't know what you have, because blessings are fabulous. And you go through seasons in life. Maybe you're in a bad season. Well, that's going to change. Because Easter's coming. I keep telling my son-in-law, Easter's coming. He said, we're waiting on it. I was happy. Dennis and I were happy. We were coming home with food, having a good time, getting ready to go on a trip the next morning. And he died. And my whole existence stopped. And I didn't know what to do with myself. So I'm in a lot of widow groups too. And it's amazing how many women are in my group, just where I live. And it's a little area. Like my grandmother was a widow probably 50 years. How did she do it? And so was my great aunt. I mean, it's like those men died. It's hard to keep going. But I keep going. I don't know what I'm going to do in my life now. Right now I'm just kind of in a lost state. Lord, what do I do? And I always just told the Lord, when the kids were little, trying to get out of the mess I was in, I'm like, Lord, just put me where you'd have me to be, because I'm too stupid to know what to do. I am. I mean, how do you think, without the grace of God, there's no other way to explain how I raised these children, and they are what they are today? How'd that happen? I didn't do it. God did it. I didn't do it. I was not educated. I didn't have the intelligence to do that. He just put stuff in front of me and said, do this. I'm waiting on another sign right now for the other part of my life. Because I'm going to live to be 100. No, I am. I'm trying. I mean, I got a lot wrong with me, but I'm trying. I didn't plan on getting married. I didn't plan on having children. I didn't plan on none of this. It just all came to me. But I had to go through that bad time for us to come out to where we are. I do believe that.
But I still ask God, why can't I have a great marriage? I've got friends who've been married 50 years, and they celebrate, and they're happy. Well, did I? Well, I didn't get that. I'm just waiting for the next adventure. Be, try to know people before you commit your life to them, I guess. I'd have to go back and say my grandmother. That'd be my... kept encouraging me to leave. And she testified in my trial. Yeah, she was a wonderful... She died of cancer a few years ago. But if I remember, Sissy was wonderful. Because she came in that house and analyzed it immediately. And other people came in my house. They didn't. No, they thought we were just fine. And then when it exploded, that's what's bad is what are you going to do? Where are you going to go? What are you going to do? It was just it was so embarrassing for like people in my work to know about it and people to know I was trying to get out of it and build this life. Because see, if I could have stayed, I mean, I did stay a long time, and it was like, well, I just stay here because I thought, well, if I get out there, what am I going to do? How am I going to make a living? How am I going to raise these children? But look, if I had stayed, they probably wouldn't be nothing like they are today. Their lives would just been, they'd be beat down and being abused in their family probably. They wouldn't have no education. It was hard. It was a struggle. But, life's a struggle. I don't care who you are, it's a struggle, isn't it?